Alright, here's our first one about these presidents. We actually have two presidents today. We have Teddy and we have Taft. That would be Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. This is number one. This is about Teddy and the trust. Alright? First off, Teddy Roosevelt was a vice president of McKinley. He had actually gained his fame in the Spanish-American War, which we'll talk about in imperialism. And so when McKinley is running for re-election in 1900, he chooses him on the offshoot chance that he's going to win, and he does, okay? However, a man named Leon Kozolga, who is a self-proclaimed anarchist, will shoot President McKinley on September 6, 1901, only a few short months after he's been inaugurated for the second time. This means that Teddy Roosevelt is now president, and in fact they said the cowboy is now president because he was known for cowboy with the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War. Alright? Now, Teddy Roosevelt's plan for America was called the Square Deal. You would think a square, SpongeBob SquarePants, whatever, 4 sides, but actually it had 3 C's. I know that's random, but there you go. So there are the 3 C's. We're going to control corporations. How? Trust. They called him a trust buster, and we'll look at that. Number 2, we're going to protect the consumers. The Pure Food and Drug Act, Meat Inspection Act, etc. And lastly, we're going to conserve natural resources. This is what Teddy Roosevelt's whole presidency is about, and he's the first real president that I spend time focusing really big on. They love Teddy Roosevelt, right? So, the next thing were Roosevelt's many nicknames. He was called the Trust Buster because he perceived hatred of trust, but we'll look at that. He was called Teddy, and the actual teddy bear is named for him. Had to do with a hunting trip, and it's an interesting story. He was called a bully. World affairs, he intimidated opponents and critics. They said he preached like a bully pulpit from he's preaching and intimidating. His favorite nickname, however, is TR, his initials. But we're going to call him Teddy. Sorry, he's dead. What's he going to do? I don't know. Now, the first big thing Teddy has to deal with is in 1902, the coal miners' union decides to go on strike. Now, why is this such a big deal? Coal ran everything. We're using it for railroads, heating homes. And so, he's got to deal with it. Now, what he actually did is he got involved himself through a method called arbitration. And he basically went in and said, okay, what do you want? What do you want? And basically solved it. He's really going to set this as a standard. He actually arbitrated an agreement to the Russo-Japanese War, and all those other things. It's really cool. Now, the Sherman Antitrust Act had already existed, meaning you're not allowed to have a trust. And here we have this whole idea about the trust being this untamable beast, and it's going to rip up a society, and we have to deal with it. So, let's see how they dealt with the trust. The first one was we had a court case called the U.S. versus E.C. Knight Company. In short, this basically said that the United States or a state could only have limited power in destroying the trust. So they basically ruled against the antitrust law, and trust will continue, okay? Now, Teddy Roosevelt was called a trust buster, but in reality, what Teddy Roosevelt did is he went on a trust case-by-case basis. And you can see, if it's a good trust, like the bear he has on a leash, he used it to his advantage. Whereas if it was a bad trust, he did exactly what he did. He shot it. He killed it, okay? Now, one of the bad trusts he actually felt was the Northern Security Company. It was a railroad trust. And he's going to force this into the Supreme Court. And right here, they actually said that, yes, the Northern Securities Company must be broken up. So E.C. Knight, you can't. Northern Securities, you can. Why? Again, that theme we've talked about. The Constitution is a living document. So as society changes, it can as well. And that's really apparent here in these two court cases, all right? So know those two. Now, Congress will also pass what is called the Elkins Act and the Hepburn Act. The Elkins Act basically, and also the Hepburn Act, are going to give more federal control over the railroads to Congress. Basically, they can decide what's going on. So this is kind of the end of the trust, right? Which is why they call him the trust buster. Now, was Teddy Roosevelt about civil rights? We had a fourth C. No. Now, there is a big story, and that is the fact that Booker T. Washington was the first African American in the White House, and he was invited by Teddy Roosevelt. This was done more or less just to try to amp up his political status, because he is going to try to run for re-election in 1904, and he does, and he wins. But he wasn't about civil rights. However, a fifth cousin of his, FDR, is. All right? And so we'll get to that in a minute.